The alarm broke through the quiet of Outpost Kavarian 7 like a crack of thunder. Warcast Admiral Threnzig stopped mid-stride in the command center, his three eyes narrowing at the red lights flashing across every display. Around him, junior officers scrambled to their stations, their movements quick and practiced. "Report," he commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. Intelligence Director Salveth approached, her data tablet glowing with urgent information. "Admiral, we have confirmation. The unknown vessel has been detected again. Same energy signature as before." Threnzig felt his chest tighten. 3 cycles ago, everything had been normal. The Drell Empire controlled this sector of space as it had for thousands of years. Their territory stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their fleet was unmatched, and their military doctrine had been perfected over 40 millennia. They had conquered 2,000 different species. They knew every threat, every technology, every possible enemy. Then the vessel appeared. It came from nowhere, from a region of space marked as dead and uninhabitable. No hails, no warnings, no identification signals. Just a small ship, barely the size of a frigate, moving through Drell space like it owned the stars. When 2 patrol craft moved to intercept, the vessel disabled them both in seconds. Not destroyed, disabled. The crews were unharmed, but their ships floated dead in space, every system shut down. That was the first unsettling detail. The Drell Empire did not show mercy. Mercy was weakness. Yet this unknown vessel had shown restraint. Why? "Show me the data," Threnzig said, moving to the central display. Salveth pulled up the readings. The vessel's energy signature filled the screen in lines of angry red. "We ran it through every database. 40,000 years of Imperial records, 2,000 conquered species, every known ship design, every propulsion system, every weapons configuration." She paused, her expression grim. "Nothing matches, not even close." "That's impossible," Threnzig muttered. "There's more, Admiral." Salveth expanded the display. "The acceleration curve. Look at this." Threnzig studied the numbers and felt a chill run down his spine. The vessel had accelerated from a dead stop to 0.8 light speed in under 30 seconds. Then it had stopped just as quickly, as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. No crew could survive those forces. The gravitational pressure would turn any living being into paste against the walls. "We need to capture it," Threnzig said, "or destroy it. Either way, we need answers." "The High Council has authorized a pursuit fleet," Salveth confirmed. 3 capital ships, 12 interceptors, full weapons loadout. "You have command, Admiral." Threnzig nodded. It was a strong force, more than enough to handle any known threat. The capital ships alone could level a planet. The interceptors were the fastest vessels in the Imperial fleet, capable of running down anything that moved. They had never failed. But as Threnzig walked toward the docking bay, doubt gnawed at him. This vessel was different. It had appeared from nowhere, moved like nothing they had ever seen, and shown mercy when it should have destroyed. What kind of enemy showed mercy? The pursuit fleet launched within the hour. 3 massive capital ships, each one a kilometer long, bristling with weapons and shields. Behind them came 12 interceptors, sleek and deadly, their pilots handpicked from the Warcast elite. They moved in perfect formation, a display of imperial power that had brought entire civilizations to their knees. Threnzig stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fang, and watched the stars slip past. The ship's AI calculated the unknown vessel's trajectory and predicted its most likely position. The fleet adjusted course, moving at maximum speed toward the intercept point. 6 hours to intercept, the navigation officer reported. 6 hours. Threnzig spent them reviewing tactical scenarios with his officers. They studied every piece of data from the previous encounters. The vessel's speed, its maneuvers, the way it had disabled the patrol craft without destroying them. They built response plans for every possibility. Engineer Cast Morphic joined the discussion, his tentacles tapping nervously on his data pad. The technology required for that acceleration curve. "Admiral, I don't think it's possible. Not with any physics we understand." "Then their physics are different," Threnzig replied. "Find out how." When the fleet finally arrived at the predicted coordinates, the scanners showed nothing. Empty space, cold and dark. Threnzik felt a moment of frustration. Had the vessel escaped? Had their calculations been wrong? Then Salveth spoke, her voice tight with tension. "Admiral, contacts. Single vessel at Lagrange Point 7. The main display updated. There it was, sitting perfectly still in the gravitational sweet spot between two gas giants. The unknown vessel. Small, dark, and somehow menacing despite its size. "It's waiting," Morphic said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It knew we were coming." Threnzik stared at the display. The engineer was right. The vessel hadn't fled. It hadn't hidden. It had positioned itself exactly where they would find it, as if it wanted to be caught. As if this entire chase had been planned. "Battle stations," Threnzik ordered. "All weapon systems online. Shields to maximum. Interceptors, spread out and surround the target. If it moves, I want everyone ready." The fleet moved into position with practiced efficiency. The three capital ships formed a triangle around the unknown vessel, their weapons locked and ready. The interceptors spread out in a wide net, cutting off every escape route. The unknown vessel didn't move. It sat there in the darkness of space, silent and still, like a predator watching its prey. Threnzik felt sweat forming on his brow. Something about this felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. "Admiral," the communications officer called out. "Should we attempt to hail them?" Threnzik nodded slowly. "Open all channels. Broadcast in every known language. I want to know who they are and what they want in our space." As the communications officer prepared the transmission, Salveth moved closer to Threnzik. "Admiral, if they refuse to respond, what are your orders?" Threnzik looked at the small vessel on his screen. So tiny compared to his massive fleet, so insignificant. Yet somehow he knew it was anything but insignificant. "If they don't respond," he said quietly, "then we find out how strong their shields really are." The transmission went out in 847 different languages, ancient tongues from conquered worlds, dialects from species long extinct, mathematical sequences, musical patterns, even basic pictograms. The Zrel Empire had perfected the art of communication over 40,000 years. They could speak to anyone, anywhere. The unknown vessel remained silent. Threnzik watched the chronometer. 1 minute passed, then 2. The fleet held position, weapons charged and ready. The silence stretched, becoming almost unbearable. Then the communications console lit up. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," the officer said, her voice showing surprise. "Audio only. It's coming in on the high command frequency." Threnzik felt his blood run cold. The high command frequency was classified at the highest level. Only flag officers and the Emperor himself had access to those codes. How could an unknown vessel possibly know them? "Put it through," he ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was clear, calm, and speaking perfect Zrel high command dialect. Not the common trade language that most aliens learned, not the simplified grammar used for diplomacy. The actual military command language with all its subtle nuances and formal structure. "This is the TCS Defiant, representing the Terran Coalition. You have entered our observation zone. We request that you stand down and maintain your current position." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the communications console as if it had spoken in tongues. Terran Coalition? No one had ever heard of them. And what did they mean by observation zone? This was Zrel space, claimed and controlled for thousands of years. Threnzik found his voice. "This is Warcast Admiral Threnzik of the Zrel Empire. You are in violation of Imperial law. Identify yourself immediately and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." There was a pause. When the voice responded, it carried a hint of something that might have been amusement. "We are aware of Imperial law, Admiral Threnzik. We have observed your expansion into this sector for 40 standard years. We are not in violation of anything. You are in our observation zone." 40 years? Threnzik exchanged glances with Salveth. If this Terran coalition had been watching them for 40 years, why had they never detected them? Why were there no records, no intelligence reports, no previous encounters? "Unknown vessel, you will submit to Imperial authority or face immediate destruction. This is your final warning." "Admiral," the voice replied, still calm, still measured. "We believe there has been a misunderstanding. To demonstrate our goodwill and to help you understand your current situation, we are transmitting technical data." Morphic's console erupted with incoming data. The engineer stared at his screens, his tentacles frozen in mid-motion. "Admiral, they're sending us—" "This can't be right. What is it?" Threnzik demanded. "Complete technical specifications. Every ship in our fleet, the Eternal Fang, the Void Reaver, the Star Crusher, all 12 interceptors, hull composition, shield frequencies, weapons configurations, power output, even our reactor designs." Morphic looked up, his face pale, "Including classified systems. Things that shouldn't exist outside of our most secure databases." Threnzik felt the deck seem to tilt beneath his feet. That was impossible. Those specifications were protected by the best encryption the Empire could produce. They were stored in isolated systems, never connected to any network that could be accessed remotely. How could this vessel possibly have them? "Verify it," he ordered. "Check if the data is accurate." Morphic worked quickly, comparing the transmitted data against his own records. His tentacles moved slower with each passing second. Finally, he stopped and looked at the Admiral. "It's perfect. Down to the smallest detail. They know everything about our ships, but how?" Salveth whispered. "Our stealth fields are military grade. Nothing should be able to scan through them. Not even our own most advanced sensors can penetrate them from this distance." The voice from the Defiant spoke again. "We understand this is difficult to process. We have technologies that may seem advanced to you. We do not wish for conflict. Stand down, Admiral, please." Threnzik felt anger rising in his chest. Advanced? They were showing off, demonstrating their superiority, treating the Empire like children who needed to be educated. No one spoke to the Jurel Empire that way. "No one, all weapons, lock on target. Fire a warning shot. Particle beam 50% power. Let's see how good their shields really are." The weapons officer hesitated for just a moment, then obeyed. The Eternal Fang's main particle beam fired, a lance of pure energy that crossed the distance at 0.8 light speed. It was a devastating weapon, capable of cutting through any known shield technology. The Defiant moved. It wasn't a smooth acceleration. It wasn't a calculated maneuver. The vessel simply wasn't where it had been. One moment it sat stationary at the Lagrange point. The next moment it was 500 kilometers to starboard, as if it had simply stepped sideways through space. The particle beam missed completely, dissipating harmlessly into the void. "Target relocated," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "Updating firing solutions." "How long did it take them to move?" Threnzik asked. The tactical officer checked his instruments. 0.5 seconds, Admiral. They detected our beam charging, calculated the trajectory, and moved. All in half a second. That was impossible. The particle beam traveled at nearly light speed. There should have been no time to react, no warning, no chance to move. Yet the Defiant had done exactly that. The voice from the Defiant returned, and this time there was no amusement. "Admiral Threnzik, that was unwise. We did not come here to fight. We came to observe and, when necessary, to make contact. You have forced our hand." "All ships, weapons free," Threnzik ordered. "Destroy that vessel." What happened next would be studied by Imperial tacticians for years to come. 3 capital ships and 12 interceptors opened fire simultaneously. Particle beams, plasma torpedoes, kinetic missiles, laser arrays. Enough firepower to obliterate a small moon. The Defiant danced. There was no other word for it. The small vessel moved through the storm of weapons fire like water flowing around rocks. It accelerated, decelerated, changed direction in ways that should have been physically impossible. Every shot missed. Every missile failed to acquire lock. Every beam struck empty space, and through it all the Defiant didn't fire back. "Admiral," Salveth said urgently, "they're not fighting. They're just avoiding our fire." "Then we make it harder to avoid," Threnzik growled. "All ships, saturation fire. Fill every vector. They can't dodge everything." The fleet poured more fire into the space around the Defiant, hundreds of weapons firing in overlapping patterns, creating a web of destruction that should have been inescapable. The tactical displays showed it clearly. There was nowhere to go, no safe direction, no way out. The Defiant proved them wrong. It moved through impossible gaps, threading between weapons fire with precision that seemed almost casual. It was like watching a master dancer perform among a crowd of stumbling children. Then it stopped moving. It hung there in space, perfectly still once more as if inviting them to take their best shot. Target stationary, the tactical officer reported. All weapons locked on. Fire everything, Threnzik ordered. Now, the Defiant vanished. Not moved, not dodged, vanished. One moment it was there locked in targeting. The next moment sensors showed nothing. No energy signature, no mass reading, no trace that it had ever existed. Threnzik felt his chest tighten. Scan all frequencies. Wide spectrum. Find that ship. Admiral, the sensor officer said, his voice barely steady. Contact. It's behind us. Between our 3 capital ships, the display updated. The Defiant now sat at the exact center of their formation, surrounded by the Empire's finest warships. In a position where a single mistake would be fatal, where there was no room to maneuver, no space to dodge, and from that impossible position the voice spoke again. We did not want this, Admiral, but you have left us no choice. Stand down, or we will be forced to demonstrate exactly why that would be in your best interest. The Defiant began moving again, but this time it was different. This time it wasn't avoiding. It was acting. The first interceptor lost power in an instant. Its engines went dark, its weapons system shut down, and it drifted forward on momentum alone. No explosion, no damage to the hull, just a complete systems failure. Interceptor 7 reports total power loss, the communications officer called out. Crew is alive, but all systems are offline. Before Threnzik could respond, another interceptor went dark. Then another. The Defiant moved between them like a ghost, too fast for weapons lock, too precise for area saturation. Each time it passed near one of their ships, that ship simply stopped working. What are they doing? Salveth demanded. How are they disabling our ships without any visible weapons fire? Morphic was studying his instruments with growing horror. I'm detecting some kind of electromagnetic pulse, but it's targeted. Precise. It's hitting our ship's most vulnerable systems with surgical accuracy. They're not destroying anything. They're just turning us off. The Eternal Fang shuddered as the Defiant passed within 100 meters of its hull. Threnzik gripped his command chair as warning lights flashed across every console. For a moment, he thought they were about to lose power too. Then the light stabilized and the Defiant moved on. They had been spared. The human vessel could have disabled the flagship just as easily as the interceptors, but it had chosen not to. It was sending a message. We can destroy you whenever we want. We're choosing not to. All capital ships focus fire on that vessel, Threnzik ordered. Everything we have. The 3 capital ships opened up with their main weapons. The space around the Defiant lit up with energy beams and explosive rounds. The tactical display showed perfect convergence. There was no escape. The Defiant executed a maneuver that made Morphic's eyes go wide. It turned 90 degrees on its axis in a fraction of a second, then accelerated straight up relative to the fleet's position. The G-forces involved should have liquefied any crew inside. The stress on the hull should have torn the ship apart. Instead, the vessel moved smoothly, elegantly, as if gravity was just a suggestion it could ignore. All 3 capital ships' attacks missed their target, and one plasma torpedo from the Void Reaver nearly hit the Star Crusher instead. Cease fire. Cease fire, Threnzik shouted. We're going to hit each other. The weapons fell silent. The Defiant stopped moving and held position above the fleet, looking down on them like a predator studying its prey. 8 of their 12 interceptors were now drifting powerless. The capital ships were intact but rattled. Not a single shot had landed on target. Salveth moved to Threnzik's side, her voice low. Admiral, their reaction times. It's not possible. They're moving before we fire. It's like they know what we're going to do before we do it. Maybe they do, Morphic added, not looking up from his console. I've been analyzing their movement patterns. There's a consistency to their dodges. They're not reacting to our weapons after we fire. They're predicting our firing solutions and moving before the trigger is pulled. That's impossible, Threnzik said, but his voice lacked conviction. So is everything else they've done, Morphic replied. The communications console activated again. The voice from the Defiant was as calm as ever, but there was an edge to it now. Admiral Threnzik, you have lost 8 vessels and come dangerously close to destroying your own ships. We have not killed a single member of your crew. We do not wish to harm you. But if you continue this attack, we will be forced to escalate our response. Threnzik stared at the display. The Defiant hung there in space, still and waiting. Small, insignificant in size, but undeniably dangerous. More dangerous than anything the Empire had ever encountered. What if we use the planet killers? He asked quietly. Salveth looked at him with alarm. Admiral, those weapons are reserved for planetary bombardment. They're not meant for ship-to-ship combat. The energy release could damage our own vessels. I know what they're meant for, Thrensix snapped. But nothing else is working. If we can't disable them, we destroy them. Authorization code Thrensix 77 Alpha. Unlock planet killer weapons. The weapons officer entered the codes with shaking hands. Planet killers armed, Admiral. Targeting solution locked. On your command. Thrensix opened his mouth to give the order. Before the words could leave his lips, his console lit up with an incoming transmission. Not audio this time. Data. Massive amounts of data flooding their systems. What is this? He demanded. Morphic's tentacles flew across his console. It's files. Historical files. Images, videos, documents. They're coming from the Defiant. Put it on screen, Thrensix ordered. The main display flickered and changed. Images appeared, battles, thousands of them. Cities burning, ships exploding, planets scarred by weapons fire. The scale of destruction was horrifying. These weren't border skirmishes or regional conflicts. These were wars of extinction. What are we looking at? Salveth whispered. The voice from the Defiant answered. Human history, Admiral. 40,000 years of your Empire's existence. We've had roughly 10,000 years of recorded conflict. These are our wars. Wars between nations, between ideologies, between religions. Wars over resources, over territory, over ideas. We are very, very good at war. The images kept coming. Weapons of increasing sophistication. Nuclear explosions. Chemical warfare. Biological weapons. Orbital bombardments. Things that made even Zrel military technology look primitive. You want to use your planet killers, Admiral. We understand. We've used similar weapons ourselves. Many times. Against our own people. Against our own planet. Do you know what happens when a species becomes too good at killing? Do you know what happens when every conflict escalates to total destruction? The images showed devastated landscapes. Cities reduced to glass. Continents scarred by craters. Entire populations gone. Then something else. Rebuilding. Slowly. Carefully. Humanity putting itself back together. Eventually you learn. Or you die. We almost chose death. We came very, very close to extinction, but we learned. We unified. We stopped fighting each other and started working together. Not because we became peaceful, but because we understood the cost of not being peaceful. Thrensix stared at the images. The Zrel Empire had conquered through overwhelming force. They were efficient, ruthless, and effective. But this was different. This was savagery on a scale he had never imagined. These humans had turned that savagery on themselves, survived it, and emerged unified. Admiral, the voice continued, you're preparing to fire weapons that can destroy planets. We have similar weapons, better ones. But we don't use them anymore. Not because we can't, because we know where that path leads. Your point? Thrensix asked, his voice harsh. Our point is this. You've been the strongest power in this region of space for 40,000 years. You've never met anyone who could challenge you. You've never had to think about restraint or mercy or consequences. We have. We've walked the path you're on. We know where it goes. The images stopped. The display returned to normal, showing just the Defiant hanging in space. The voice spoke one more time, calm but firm. Stand down, Admiral. Not because you have to, but because you should. We're offering you a choice. Take it. Thrensix looked at his officers. Salveth's face was pale. Morphic's tentacles hung limply at his sides. The weapons officer had his hand frozen over the firing controls. They had entered this battle confident, superior, ready to crush any resistance. Now they stood in the wreckage of that confidence, facing an enemy that could have destroyed them at any moment but chose not to. An enemy that showed mercy not as weakness but as strength. And the terrifying thing, the thing that made Thrensix's blood run cold, was the realization that the humans were right. They did know where this path led. They had walked it. They had survived it. The question was, would the Zrel Empire be wise enough to listen? All ships, Thrensix said quietly. Cease fire. Maintain defensive positions only. No aggressive actions. He paused, then added, disarm planet killers. The tension on the bridge eased slightly, but only slightly, because everyone knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. 20 hours passed in tense silence. The Defiant maintained its position. The Zrel fleet kept their weapons powered but not aimed. Ships collected the disabled interceptors. Crews waited nervously for whatever would come next. Threnzik spent those hours in his ready room, studying everything they knew about the humans. Which wasn't much. A species called Terrans from something called the Terran Coalition. They claimed to have been watching the Empire for 40 years. They possessed technology that made Drell military power look like children's toys. And most importantly, they didn't want to fight. That last point bothered him the most. In 40,000 years of Imperial history, superior force always led to conquest. You didn't develop better weapons to watch others. You developed them to dominate. But these humans were different. They had shown they could destroy the fleet easily, yet they chose restraint. The comm signal came through at the start of the 21st hour. The voice he had come to know spoke with careful formality. Admiral Threnzik, this is Commander Elena Vasquez of the TCS Defiant. I would like to request a face-to-face meeting. I will come to your vessel, alone and unarmed. Will you accept this proposal? Salveth immediately protested. Admiral, this could be a trick. Some kind of infiltration or sabotage. If they wanted to destroy us, they already would have, Threnzik replied. Besides, I want to see what these humans look like. He activated his comm. Commander Vasquez, your request is accepted. You may dock in our main hangar bay. Come alone as promised. Understood, Admiral. Arriving in 10 minutes. Threnzik assembled a security detail and made his way to the hangar. The massive bay was normally busy with fighter craft and supply shuttles. Now it was empty except for a dozen heavily armed guards and Salveth standing beside him. The Defiant approached smoothly, its small form barely larger than a standard shuttle. It landed without sound, settling onto the deck with what seemed like impossible gentleness for something made of metal and technology. A hatch opened on the side and a figure stepped out. Commander Elena Vasquez was smaller than Threnzik expected. Humans, it seemed, were not physically impressive. She stood perhaps 2 meters tall, covered in a white pressure suit with a clear helmet. Her skin was darker than Drell coloring, her hair black and pulled back. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. Dark and sharp, they took in everything with an intelligence that made him uncomfortable. She removed her helmet and breathed the ship's air without hesitation. Admiral Threnzik, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Her Drell was perfect, spoken with the same command dialect she had used over communications. Commander Vasquez, you speak our language well for someone from an unknown species. She smiled slightly. We've had 40 years to study your culture, Admiral. Languages, customs, military protocols, political structures. We've been very thorough. Why? Threnzik asked bluntly. Why study us for 40 years? Why not make contact sooner? Because we needed to understand who you were before we revealed ourselves. We've made mistakes before, Admiral. First contact is complicated. Do it wrong and people die. We prefer to do it right. She walked forward calmly, her movements easy despite being surrounded by armed guards. Threnzik led her to a conference room with Salveth and Morphic following. Once inside, they sat at a table meant for war councils. Let me be clear about something, Vasquez began. We don't come here as conquerors. We don't want your territory or your resources. We're here because your expansion has brought you to the edge of our space, and we needed to make sure you understood the situation. Your space? Salveth challenged. These systems have been marked as uninhabitable in our charts for thousands of years. The gravitational anomalies make navigation impossible. Impossible for you, Vasquez corrected gently. Not for us. Those gravitational anomalies you avoid, we use them. They're the foundation of our faster-than-light travel system. What you see as dangerous, we see as highways. Morphic leaned forward, his engineering mind engaged. You're using gravitational manipulation for FTL travel? But the energy requirements would be massive. The calculations alone would require computational power beyond anything we have. Which brings us to humanity's first advantage, Vasquez said. We evolved on a death world, Engineer Morphic. Our planet has gravity 2.5 times what you consider standard. Higher radiation levels, more extreme weather, predators that could hunt and kill us easily. We survived by becoming adaptable and intelligent. She stood and removed her pressure suit jacket. Underneath was a simple uniform, but when she moved, Threnzik could see the muscle definition. For her size, she was incredibly strong. Your ships pull 3, maybe 4 gravities during combat maneuvers. My people train at 8. Your pilots black out at forces that we consider routine. That's not because we're better warriors. It's because our bodies had to adapt to survive on our world. That explains the impossible maneuvers, Morphic said quietly. The G-forces that should have killed you. They're normal for your species. Our second advantage is our neural interfaces, Vasquez continued. We don't fly our ships manually. We think and they respond. My mind is directly connected to the Defiance systems through AI-assisted neural links. When you targeted us, I knew before your weapons fired because I was monitoring your ship's power fluctuations in real time. Reaction time becomes prediction time. Threnzig felt cold understanding settle over him. You weren't predicting our moves through tactical analysis. You were watching our ships prepare to fire and moving before we could pull the trigger. Exactly. It's not magic, Admiral. It's technology and biology working together. You mentioned 3 advantages, Salaveth said. What's the third? Vasquez sat back down, her expression serious. Unity. The Zrel Empire has conquered 2,000 species. You control them through superior force. You have subject worlds, occupied territories, rebellions that you crush regularly. Your empire is held together by fear and military strength. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Humanity nearly destroyed itself in global war. We came within days of complete extinction. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical weapons. We threw everything we had at each other. And when the dust settled and we saw what we had done, we made a choice. Never again. We unified not because someone conquered everyone else. We unified because we understood that our survival depended on cooperation. Every human serves by choice. Every ship in our fleet is crewed by volunteers. Every world in the Terran Coalition joined because they wanted to, not because we forced them. That sounds weak, Threnzig said. Does it? Vasquez challenged. Your soldiers fight because they must. Mine fight because they believe in what we're protecting. Your officers obey out of fear of consequences. Mine follow orders because they trust their commanders. Your empire is strong, Admiral, but it's brittle. One major defeat, one successful rebellion, and the cracks start to show. She pulled out a small data device and placed it on the table. But we're not here to lecture you about political philosophy. We're here to establish boundaries and offer something you may not have considered. Which is? Salaveth asked. Partnership, trade, knowledge exchange. We have technologies you don't. You have resources and experience we could benefit from. There's no reason we need to be enemies. And if we refuse? Threnzig asked. Vasquez's expression didn't change, but her voice became harder. Then we maintain our borders and you don't cross them. You saw what one scout vessel can do, Admiral. The Defiant is one of 3,000 ships in the Terran Coalition fleet. And we're not the only power watching your expansion with concern. The number hit like a physical blow. 3,000. If one small ship could disable 8 Imperial interceptors without breaking a sweat, what could 3,000 do? We don't want war, Vasquez continued. We've had enough war to last us 1,000 lifetimes. But we won't be conquered. We won't be threatened, and we won't stand by while aggressive expansion threatens the stability of this region. Those are our terms. Take them or leave them. She stood, putting her helmet back on. The data device contains coordinates for neutral meeting points and secure communication channels. If your Emperor wishes to discuss this further, we're available. But understand this, Admiral. The age of Drell dominance is over. The galaxy is bigger than you thought. And we're just one of the surprises waiting for you. She walked toward the door, then paused. One last thing. We showed you mercy today. Not because we're weak, but because we understand what unchecked violence leads to. We've lived it. Learn from our mistakes, Admiral. It's cheaper than making your own. Then she was gone, walking back to her ship with the same calm confidence she had arrived with. The Defiant lifted off smoothly and disappeared into the darkness of space. Threnzig stood in the hangar long after she left, staring at the small data device on the conference table. Everything had changed. The Empire faced its first true challenge in 40,000 years. The question was, how would they respond? The Imperial throne world of Zrel Prime had stood for 40,000 years. Its towers reached into the clouds, monuments to conquest and power. In the heart of the capital, the High Council chamber gathered the Empire's most powerful leaders. Admiral Threnzig stood before them, his 3 eyes focused on Emperor Zrelvax the Unyielding. The Emperor sat on his throne of black metal, his face unreadable as Threnzig finished his report. One ship, War Master Kreltok said, his voice dripping with disbelief. One ship disabled 8 of our interceptors and made our entire pursuit fleet look foolish? Yes, War Master, Threnzig confirmed. And according to Commander Vasquez, they have 3,000 more just like it. She could be lying. Intelligence Master Severon suggested. Trying to frighten us with numbers that don't exist. Perhaps, Threnzik replied. But everything else she told us has been verified. They have been watching us for 40 years. The region of space we marked as uninhabitable is indeed inhabited by them. Their technology is superior to ours in multiple areas. I don't think she was lying about their fleet strength. Emperor Zrelvax finally spoke, his voice deep and commanding. 40,000 years. In all that time, we have never encountered a species that could challenge us militarily. We have conquered worlds, absorbed civilizations, built an empire that spans hundreds of systems, and now you tell me that a species we didn't even know existed has made our fleet look weak. Yes, Emperor, Threnzik said simply. There was no point in softening the truth. Then we mobilize everything, War Master Kreltok declared. We gather the full Imperial fleet, thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. We crush them before they can organize a defense. And if they have 3,000 ships as advanced as the Defiant? Diplomatic Master Veshra asked quietly. What then? We would be sending our people into a war we cannot win. We don't know that we cannot win, Kreltok argued. We have numbers. We have experience. We have 400 years of military tradition. One skirmish doesn't mean we're defeated. It means we need to think carefully, Veshra countered. The humans offered partnership, trade, knowledge exchange. Those are not the words of conquerors. Perhaps we should consider their offer. Consider surrender, you mean? Kreltok spat. Accept that someone else has power equal to ours. Admit weakness. Is that what 40,000 years of empire has brought us to? The council erupted in argument. Some supported immediate military action. Others counseled caution. A few suggested negotiation. Threnzik watched it all and realized this was a moment that would define the Empire's future. Emperor Zrelvax raised one hand and silence fell instantly. Admiral Threnzik, you faced them directly. You spoke with their commander. What is your assessment? Can we defeat them? Threnzik considered his words carefully. Emperor, in my opinion, if we go to war with humanity, we will lose. Not quickly, perhaps. Not easily, but eventually we will lose. Their technology gives them advantages we cannot overcome with numbers alone. Then what do you suggest? The Emperor asked. I suggest we do something the Empire has never done before. I suggest we negotiate as equals. The chamber erupted again. Some council members shouted in outrage. Others looked thoughtful. Kreltok looked like he wanted to challenge Threnzik to personal combat, but Emperor Zrelvax remained silent, his eyes fixed on Threnzik. Finally he spoke. Explain. The humans showed us their history, Threnzik said. They fought themselves to the edge of extinction and chose unity over destruction. They have technologies we need. Medical advances, propulsion systems, neural interface technology. They have knowledge that could benefit the Empire immensely. He paused, then continued. But more than that, they showed us something else. They showed us mercy. They could have destroyed my entire fleet. Instead, they disabled our weapons and waited for us to make the right choice. That's not weakness, Emperor. That's confidence. That's strength. You sound like you admire them, Kreltok accused. I respect an enemy that can defeat me without killing me. Threnzik replied. I respect a power that offers partnership before demanding surrender. And yes, War Master, I admire a species that looked into the darkness of self-destruction and chose a different path. Emperor Zrelvax stood from his throne. The chamber fell silent. The Jarel Empire has ruled through strength for 40,000 years. We have never compromised. We have never negotiated as equals. We have never admitted that anyone could be our match. He walked to the center of the chamber where two crystalline pedestals stood. On one was a red crystal, on the other a blue one. Ancient tradition held that when the Emperor faced a critical decision, he would choose between the crystals. Red for war. Blue for peace. We stand at a crossroads, the Emperor said. We can choose war, gathering our full might and throwing it against this new enemy. We may win. We may lose. But either way, blood will be spilled and resources will be consumed. He looked at the blue crystal. Or we can choose something different. We can acknowledge that the galaxy is larger than we thought. That other powers exist. That maybe, just maybe, cooperation is not weakness but wisdom. His hand hovered between the two crystals. The entire council held their breath. The decision would echo through Imperial history forever. Meanwhile, light years away, Commander Elena Vasquez sat in the captain's chair of the Defiant. The ship hung at the border between Drell and Terran space, waiting. Around her, the bridge crew monitored their instruments in silence. "Commander," her communications officer said, "encrypted message from Earth Command." Vasquez activated her neural link and read the message. "Additional fleet standing by. 15 battle groups positioned along the border. Diplomatic teams prepared for negotiation. Medical ships ready for humanitarian aid. Science vessels eager to begin knowledge exchange. But most importantly, hope for peace. Prepared for war. Choice is theirs." Vasquez looked at her tactical display. If the Jrel chose war, those 15 battle groups would be just the beginning. Humanity had learned hard lessons about the cost of war. They had paid in blood in cities and entire generations. They would fight if they had to, and they would fight with everything they had learned. But they desperately hoped they wouldn't have to. "All stations, maintain readiness," Vasquez ordered. "No aggressive actions. We wait for their response." On Jrel Prime, Emperor Jrel Vax the Unyielding stood before the two crystals. His hand moved slowly, deliberately. The entire Empire's future hung on this single choice. Red meant war. Red meant holding on to tradition, onto the old ways of conquest and domination. Red meant pride and possibly destruction. Blue meant change. Blue meant admitting the galaxy was bigger than they had known. Blue meant partnership with a species that had shown them mercy. Blue meant stepping into an uncertain future. The Emperor's fingers touched one of the crystals. His decision was made. Back on the Defiant, Vasquez's communications officer suddenly straightened. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's from Jrel Prime, direct from the Imperial Palace." "Put it through," Vasquez ordered, her heart rate increasing slightly. A voice came through, speaking perfect standard English. "This is Emperor Jrel Vax of the Jrel Empire. We wish to discuss the terms of your proposed partnership. We request a formal diplomatic meeting at neutral coordinates. We come in peace." Vasquez felt the tension drain from her shoulders. The bridge crew allowed themselves small smiles. They had hoped for this outcome, prepared for the other, but genuinely hoped for this. "Emperor Jrel Vax, this is Commander Elena Vasquez. Your message is received and acknowledged with gratitude. We will transmit diplomatic protocols and meeting coordinates immediately. The Terran Coalition looks forward to working with the Jrel Empire as partners and, perhaps eventually, as friends." She sent the stand-down order to Earth Command. 15 battle groups powered down their weapons. Diplomatic teams began preparing for the most important first contact in human history. On Jrel Prime, Admiral Threnzik watched Emperor Jrelvax step away from the blue crystal, his decision made. The chamber erupted in discussion, but Threnzik felt only relief. The Empire had stood at the edge of a cliff and chosen to step back rather than jump. The age of unchallenged Jrel dominance was over. But perhaps, just perhaps, a new age of cooperation and mutual respect was beginning. It would be different. It would be difficult. It would require the Empire to change in ways it never had before. But it would be better than the alternative. In the vast darkness of space, two civilizations that had been on the brink of war began the slow process of building something else, something that had never existed before in this region of the galaxy. Peace. And in that peace, both sides understood a fundamental truth that would guide their relationship for generations to come. True strength wasn't measured by the ability to destroy. It was measured by the wisdom to choose not to. The Empire stood on edge no longer. They had stepped back from the precipice. And in doing so, they had taken their first step into a larger galaxy than they had ever imagined.